But my co-hosts are here, and our guest is here, so we shall start. I will just stop sharing the screen. Hopefully, you guys can see us properly now. Um, so hi everyone, thank you so much taking time out this evening to come to our webinar. This is brought to you by us, which is at BiteLabs. My name is Hussein. I am the Global Fellowship Program Lead, specifically for the pharmaceutical and the Leadership Fellowship Program that we run at BiteLabs. I'm also joined by Yasser. I'll ask Yasser to do his intro himself actually, and then I'll do a quick little intro about our special guest today.
Hello, everyone. My name is Asher. I'm the founder of MicroPharm. MicroPharm is mainly a pharmacy education platform. Our main aim is to get training pharmacists to pass the GPHC registration assessment. And I thought it would be a good idea to be a part of this session because I think this is the first of its kind that MicroPharm has been a part of in terms of introducing people to to industry, so the pharmaceutical industry. So looking forward to it.
Amazing. And just on that note, actually, I forgot to quickly introduce BiteLabs as well. So our fellowship program, I'll go into it more detail in a little while, but essentially it's an 8-week fellowship program, which is developed specifically to help you gain the skills, knowledge, and experience, along with the network needed to transition your career from a pharmaceutical background for this audience into the pharma industry itself. I'll go into a little bit more detail about what we cover over the next 8 weeks, and we can talk about the logistics of that after that. But before we go ahead into that, let me introduce Tayo. Tayo is a highly experienced pharmacist with over 15 years experience in clinical trials, medical information, data analysis, and drug therapy management. She's worked in clinical trial and oncology roles within the NHS, working her way up the ladder in renowned hospitals such as Oxford, Cambridge, and Gosh. Sorry. And now she works as a medical science liaison with a Japanese company. She is known for being adaptable and an effective communicator, thriving in dynamic healthcare and pharma environments. She's driven by seeing changes she implements and making impact. She also specializes in getting people into the right healthcare career for them to then progress and further. So she does that through her consulting company, JobJack Consulting. So
thank you for that intro.
like yeah, I did prepare this earlier, right? So if it was a bit robotic, I did read it out. I hope I did it. But I will hand it over to you, Yasa, to carry the conversation on. And I, for one, am very excited for this.
Okay, so I'll try to use the chat function throughout this session just to engage people, But if let's say out of 10 and 0 being you know nothing about industries in the pharmaceutical and roles in the pharmaceutical industry, let's say 0 is you know nothing and 10 is you know a lot. Out of 0 to 10, where would you put your knowledge about roles for pharmacists in the pharmaceutical industry? Oh, 6. We've got a 1.
It's quite a range.
4, 6. Oh, we've got 0.
Okay.
So if I'm completely honest, mine will sit at about 2 or 3, if I'm being completely honest. And I think being a host for this session with a knowledge base of 2 or 3 may work quite well for people who feel quite shy to say that they may not understand the terminology that's used in terms of different roles. So I will be that host that asks a lot of questions and asks for a lot of explanation, and hopefully that helps a lot of people out. So firstly, can you, I know Hussein's given his introduction for you, but can you give us an introduction of yourself, Tayo, and your current role?
Sure, no problem. Good evening, all. So I think it's important that I sort of say take it a few steps back in terms of my career progression so far. I think it's important when you're going through uni and you summer placements, you try and a range of different sort of industry areas. So I'd made sure in my summer placements that I wanted to try out hospital, community, and industry, and really see what each one offers and what the differences are between that. So I think my interest in pharma actually started during my pharmacy degree. I did a summer placement with AstraZeneca up in Macclesfield, so up north, and spent the summer there in their investigational medicinal products section. So I think that really is what gave me an exposure to actually long term, I want to end up in industry. So that was the foundation of my interest. And I think that was really the foundation of my interest in clinical trials. So obviously when you have your pre-reg, you go through various clinical therapy areas, and then you do your, I decided to stay on in hospital because I really felt it was important to get a good clinical foundation for myself. You know, people are different, but for me, I thought actually I'll get the best exposure to a range of therapy areas in hospital. But I quickly realized I didn't really want to specialize in anything, which is why I went down the clinical trials route, because that gives you an opportunity to be involved in the cutting edge of medicine, what's coming through in different therapy areas. So you don't have to be like, oh, okay, I'm in this rotation, I have to dedicate myself to respiratory or to cardiovascular. So I quickly realized that I wanted to do clinical trials in the hospital. So I did a lot of clinical trials roles, worked my way up to band 8, where my last role was to lead a clinical trials department in terms of pharmacy. But I noticed quickly that a lot of my trials were oncology based. So as much as I said I didn't want to specialize in anything, I ended up, going down the route of wanting to know more about oncology, because there's a certain level of complexity that's involved in setting up trials when it comes to oncology. So I just wanted to learn more about that. I eventually then ended up doing a master's in oncology. So I think that really gave me a good foundation into transitioning into pharma. So I transitioned, there's 2 ways of transitioning into pharma from a hospital background. You can either transition quite early on in your career, quite early on you want to go in there, or later on. So I'd had my career in the NHS. I now knew that it was time for me to transition into the pharma and looked for the best avenue for me. And I think one of the things I will say is that I was lucky in having a mentor who was already in pharma, who was a pharmacist, and they gave me a lot of ideas of where I would be best placed to use my skill set, what would be advantageous for me. And I think that's important, to find a mentor who is in pharma, who can give advice and pointers. So that's kind of a summary of my journey of spending time in the NHS. And I very much enjoyed my time in the NHS. It was very diverse. I got to try different therapy areas alongside doing my diploma. I went through the whole shebang of doing the clinical diploma and everything, just making sure that actually when I go into pharma, my clinical knowledge is sound and no one can question that. And then made the transition.
Cool. So a few things that I was thinking when you said that. So
Okay.
you did clinical pharmacy diploma, and then you did the masters as well. So was that masters, like, did you integrate that with your diploma? Was that separate, and how long was?
Completely separate. So some of you who are in your pre-reg or will go on to do your band 6s, the clinical diploma is what is needed in a way to climb up the ranks within hospital, and it really gives you a nice broad foundation of the different therapy areas, how to look at patient cases, etc., etc. And obviously different universities offer different courses, and often it can be integrated with prescribing. I know that come 2026, everyone will be prescribers once they graduate, but for those who are yet to have done that. The master's in clinical oncology was something that I chose to do, I would say was slightly on a whim. It wasn't something I had planned. I think it's always good to talk to different people. So I remember I was locuming at a hospital, long term actually, and that I was doing, various different therapy areas. And I was speaking to a lady who was in oncology, and she was like, "Oh, this diploma is I should say, this master's is something that I benefited from. It was really interesting. And I was like, okay, but I wasn't really keen on doing any more studying. But she said, oh, it closes in a week. So I was like, okay, I don't want to sort of decide it next year. So I applied. And then the rest is history. So I did that part-time over 2 years. It's not easy to do a master's part-time whilst working, and I self-funded it. So it was just something that I did. I decided on a whim, but I do see the benefit of it, and it really gave me further knowledge about oncology. Because obviously, when you're in your pharmacy degree, you're exposed to so many therapy areas. It's sometimes good to go do a deeper dive into a particular therapy area.
And you answered my next question, because my next question was, did you do it alongside work? And you did it part-time, because I was wondering, it must have been quite tiring. So at what point do you say, I want to make the jump from hospital pharmacy to the pharmaceutical industry?
So I think I've been always very strategic in my career. You can have ebbs and flows where you're happy with what's going, what you're doing. And I think at the point where I'd reached the band 8 quite quickly in my career, given my age and everything. I just was like, I know I don't want to be a chief pharmacist. That's not my end goal. And I got onto the point in my career where I was like, okay, I'm looking after these clinical trials in this department and I'm enjoying it, but it's either now or when, it's kind of that now or never kind of moment of, okay, let me make that transition. I can't say the transition was straight away or easy. I think that would be one of my biggest challenges. There was a lot of things I learned along the way about how to navigate getting into industry and who to connect with. But I decided to become a locum in oncology and clinical trials to make myself more flexible so that I could really make that jump whenever possible. So it was a lot of perseverance. It took a lot longer than I anticipated, but I think in that period where I was locuming, it allowed me to explore, other, creative outlets such as traveling, other things that interest me that aren't necessarily related to my career, but would still add value to my career.
So now that you're working in the pharmaceutical industry, what would you say to someone that has no idea? What would you say the key differences are between working in the pharmaceutical industry compared to traditional pharmacist roles in community or hospital or even primary care?
Okay. So first of all, I'll maybe explain a little bit about what being an MSL is first, because that's the area that I'm in. So it's a medical science liaison. It's part of the medical affairs department. So there's so many roles that you can have in industry. But I can only really speak from the role I'm in. I think one of the differences is, when it comes to working in a hospital, you have a lot of competing things for your attention. A doctor needs your help, a nurse needs your help, a patient needs your help, the dispensary might need your help. So there's a lot of things going on all at once. That can happen in medical affairs. You've got lots of projects running alongside each other, or doctors that you're going to be speaking to in the field, but it's not necessarily at all the time. I think that would be the main thing. I certainly, when I stepped out of working in the NHS, I think I would say I was working at a pressured state at all times, but I was very used to that. So that wasn't something that I thought was detrimental. But when I stepped out, I was like, oh, most people don't work at this pressurized state 100% of the time. So I think that for me has been the main difference. Of course, there are pressures in my work now. I just think it feels healthier for me in terms of ebbs and flows of that. And being able to manage my time and projects a lot more compared to being in the hospital where you're in demand at all times. So I think that would be a key difference. I think also, if you love patient contact, you're not going to have that in pharma. I think it seems obvious, but it's something that needs to be stated that, when you're in community and hospital, you are patient facing. So you're constantly in contact with patients and making an impact directly into that patient's lives. In pharma, you are still affecting patients, but it's at more of a it's a different level that's happening at. You are interacting more with healthcare professionals. To the same extent, you interact with healthcare professionals in community and hospital, but now you're interacting from a medical affairs point of view, you're interacting in a different remit. So usually with those who are the top of their game, when it comes to, it's what we call key opinion leaders, KOLs. They are very research driven. They know the landscape. They are the ones that people go to when they want advice. So you're having those kind of conversations with those healthcare professionals, as well as others as well, regional or local levels. You'll have conversations and they'll come and ask you questions. So part of being an MSL is I go into the field. If there is a query that is medical or scientific in nature that is beyond what the sales or commercial team can discuss, they are referred on to me, and I have that sort of engagement and discussion with them to answer what their questions are. And that typically is around either the drug of the company that you're working for, or the landscape as a whole and how things fit in. And I do think my clinical trials background massively helped with that. So trials isn't something new to me. I know, endpoints and all those things that need to be discussed. So yeah, it can be, your conversations can be less patient focused and more general, but about the landscape as a whole.
Yeah, completely understand, and I completely appreciate. You didn't say the word, but I'm going to use it. The chaos that is working in the NHS sometimes. So, like when I first started my junior pharmacist role, I was on an admissions ward, and there's just everything was ringing, and there was all sorts of sounds, and people. I was like, "How the hell do you work in this?" And there's like, "Don't worry, it starts to be your background noise."
Yes.
So yeah, I completely appreciate that, and I guess that could be a big change. You are talking about medical affairs. I know it's the only you're saying it's the field you have most experience in, but can you just briefly touch on the other areas that people may work in when they work in the pharmaceutical industry?
So I think one of the main things I want to emphasize, yes, when you have a pharmacy degree and then you've passed your professional exams, you've entered into a vocation. But I think it's important, and it's in healthcare and it's about patients, but it's important to remember that your degree is fundamentally a science degree. So I don't think there's anything in pharma that is off limits really to a pharmacist. It really depends on your skill set, what you like, what you think your strengths are, where you think you'll shine. So I'll touch on a few, but I really do think you can actually go into any area. There's manufacturing, especially if someone has done an aseptic background, gone down that route in hospital. Manufacturing is an area being involved. It sounds it's probably not something people are used to, but labeling, there's a lot that goes into labeling of drugs. So that's always an area that, and we look at labels all the time as pharmacists. So actually there's a lot of skill set in that. Pharmacovigilance, that's looking at AEs, so adverse events, or what we also kind of call side effects that come through, and monitoring of that. Medicine information is another area, and that is something you develop quite well within the hospital. When you have your medicines information rotation, if you're working in a hospital, each pharmaceutical company will have a medicines information department where queries can come from the members of the public or from healthcare professionals direct to them, and so managing that. Regulatory, that was not something that suited my personality, in terms of you're looking at the compliance of that's being involved when it comes to the pharmaceutical industry. So regulatory and that could be quite broad in multiple ways. I think market access as well. So that's quite niche in terms of getting drug to market, and looking at the market value when you're presenting it to. So obviously in the UK, yes, we have a private sector, but our private sector is actually very small, like 5 to 10%. So actually the majority of sales when it comes for pharmaceutical companies is to the NHS. So when you're presenting the NHS, things need to be approved by NICE. So things like market access producing dossiers as to why should your drug be approved or reimbursed by NICE. So there's quite a lot of scope, my mentor is in governance, like global governance, and some people go down the commercial route. So that I know pharmacists who do work in commercial sales, marketing and branding as well. If you're more creative and you want to branch out into, okay, how can I be involved in marketing or sort of, I don't want to say advertising, but just producing materials to those who will be utilizing it. So being involved in that side of things. So I don't really feel there's anything off limits for pharmacists. I just think you have to be strategic and get the right work experience. I will speak for myself. I felt, my mentor knew that I was comfortable talking, as we can see, and also being able to have a rapport. So, I'm on the wards. I've talked to doctors all day, every day, nurses all day, every day. When you're talking about patient, advising about this drug, advising about this treatment, saying there's a side effect. So I was used to that pattern. So when it then came to, okay, what's the best avenue for me to enter into the industry? Medical affairs sat well with my skill set of being a communicator to all types of people, of all types of data. I had a clinical trials background. Another area I could have gone into would have been the clinical development, so clinical trials, being involved in a CRO, so like a contract research organization where they set up trials in hospitals and liaise with them. So that could have been another avenue I could have gone into. But I felt that on speaking with my mentor, this was the best avenue for me, and I enjoy it. So.
Amazing. And yeah, like you said, a lot of different areas that you can
Yeah.
work. I found even the mention of the aspects of marketing is quite interesting, because those with creative minds may fancy even something a bit different to the
Yeah.
traditional. I get now we've gone through lots of positivity.
Okay.
What would you think are the biggest challenges in your role, and how do you overcome them?
I think one of the biggest challenges was entry. And I think that was a lot of perseverance on my part, because it's even though I had a mentor who could give me advice, it's still a very different world from the hospital. And I think that wasn't something that you can necessarily learn. I think it was one of the key things was I needed to network more, and it's not something that necessarily comes naturally to me or naturally to pharmacists as a group of individuals. When we work in the NHS, we're working kind of selflessly. A lot of even other healthcare professionals don't necessarily know what pharmacists do in the hospital. So we're not necessarily used to trumping ourselves up and selling ourselves. And I think that was part of one of the things when it comes to entry, you need to sell yourself, and you need to sell your skill set. You need to sell why you can do this role, and network with the appropriate agencies. I think the main way of getting into pharma is to be with agencies, also go through referrals. So build your network of people who are in pharma as is, and have conversations with them and find out more. I think that would be one of my challenges. I think also I joined pharma during the pandemic. So I worked in hospital during the pandemic, and then I think it was the tail end of the pandemic. But I went from being in a busy hospital where you're talking with so many, it's very multidisciplinary, you're talking with so many different people, to now being at home on my laptop in the field. That was quite a shift. I think it was a challenge in terms of I had to do a lot of studying and getting adapting to the pharma industry and what it entails. I think there's a different mindset as well, because the NHS is a public body, and when you're going into pharma, it's corporate, it's private. So there are different mindset shifts that you need to have. And that can take time. You learn that, and you speak with people. But I think those would be, I don't necessarily want to say a challenge, but just things I needed to learn and adapt to very quickly, that I'm no longer, it can be very easy to, when you're having the conversations with doctors, because you're a pharmacist, you know a lot more, but there might be restrictions on what you can talk about. So, for example, if I know about a certain drug and I could, talk about it, but actually that's not the purpose of our conversation. And so you need to really focus on when I'm out in the field, what's the aim of our conversation? Yes, I am a pharmacist. Yes, I know beyond probably what we're discussing, but actually, it's the focus is what we're discussing there and then, and they might have a patient, but you're not going to have that patient conversation. You're going to have a conversation about what they've requested for.
Yeah. So a lot of change in terms of mindset. Can you, I don't know if this is tough for you to answer, but you were talking about mindset shift, and
Yeah.
can you dig into that a little deeper?
I think I think there's several layers to that. So I knew that I would need to be more you develop a lot of resilience in the NHS and perseverance, but it's more because of, I'll agree with you, the chaos that the NHS is, whereas the perseverance or resilience is a different, is a packaged differently. So, you're out in the field needing to have these scientific discussions that involves a lot of prepping. You're juggling a lot of different projects and things that are going on in medical affairs, and you kind of learn that prioritization skills from pharmacy, because if you've done an on call and your bleep is going off, and you learn those kind of skill sets in terms of managing that. So the mindset is really to know that you're not in a public body, you're not, I think also that you're in a business as well. So at the end of the day, you are helping a patient. Definitely, I think that's at the core of pharma, uh, despite what people like to think. But in order to help patients, you need to also, money is needing to be made. So some things are made due to business decisions. And I think that's quite important to have that mindset shift is important there, because it's a business. Certain things can be done, can't be done, depending on finances. And I think that is the same actually in community, in a way. It's just sort of packaged differently, because in community you're kind of compensated by the NHS, but it's not the same in pharma. So I think it's important to have that mindset shift in terms of, okay, you're working in a business. Yes, you're going to help patients, but it's not in the same way that you used to. It's more that you're helping healthcare professionals from a medical affairs point of view in that sense. Other areas you can still be helping. I think you are a cog in a massive wheel. And that's the same in the NHS in a way, but there's lots of different functionality. So I do think there are similarities that you can pull from being in the NHS, that you work with so many different people, so many different functionalities. The same happens in pharma. It just might be more diverse. It might be more like very dynamically different compared to the NHS.
So I know we've got a big mix of people that are in this call. So we've got qualified pharmacists, trainee pharmacists, and I also recognize some names of pharmacy students. I won't call anyone out, but it's really nice to see pharmacy students in this call. So I think there's something that is quite important from your story, and that's the fact that you spoke about a placement that you had when you were an undergrad, if I'm correct.
Yeah, that's correct. Yes.
How important is that for pharmacy students, or for anyone considering the industry?
I think it just gives you a taste of something. I don't think it's that without it you'll never get into pharma. I think that's not true. I've met a lot of people who have gotten into pharma and never had a summer placement with a community, with a industry placement. I think I was just very strategic in that I wanted to have exposure to all three, because I didn't feel that I could make an educated decision as to what really do I want to do as a pharmacist unless I had all three. So, in one of my summers I did hospital placement. In another of my summers I actually I did community, but I actually did it abroad in America. So I did a community placement abroad. And then, my third year summer, I did AstraZeneca. And I think and that was not easy. I actually, back in the days when the BNF was not electronic, at the back of the book, there are a list of all the pharma companies. And I literally just wrote to all of them, looking for a summer placement, hoping one of them would take me. And that's kind of what I did. But I don't think that's a necessity. So I don't want anyone to feel like, oh, I've not done industry, I can't possibly go into pharma. That's not true. Because at the end of the day, as a pharmacist, you're coming with drug knowledge. Like, that cannot be taken away from you. So when you were starting in pharma, the drug knowledge is already there. So that's not even a hurdle you're needing to climb. It's more knowing how pharma works, knowing how that company fits into the drug landscape, where their drug is positioned, the moving parts, the pharmacovigilance, the regulatory affairs. I think it's more, the compliance that's involved in the pharma industry. I think it's more learning that you now need to learn, as opposed to comparing yourself with another science entry person where drug isn't what they've learned. They're not a drug expert. I'm not saying that they can't acquire those skills, but it's just you're starting from that baseline of, I know my drugs, basically. So I don't think it's a necessity, but it did help me realize that actually, yeah, I like industry, because I felt it would use the whole range of my skill set that I learned in my pharmacy degree.
Yeah. So I was going to ask you for the final question before we go to questions from the audience.
Okay.
About tips that you have, but people are already jumping into very specific questions, and I think it'll be
Okay.
nice to start going through the questions. So
Okay.
the first question, and Zainab's put that, don't want to sound silly. There's no such thing as a silly question.
No such thing as a silly question. Absolutely.
Because it does sound quite complicated from what you said. How do you apply to pharma companies? And can you give examples? And what I mean by complicated is, you were speaking about networking quite a lot, and the fact that and I've heard that a lot. I've heard that a lot from people in pharma to say. So can you touch on that? How do you even apply? Where do you begin?
Where do you begin? So first off, I always say to people, do you have a LinkedIn profile? If you don't, I don't know what you're doing. So you need to have a LinkedIn profile, because I actually will say, for this role that I got, it's because my LinkedIn profile was optimized. I was actually approached. So it's not something I actually applied for. An agency found me on LinkedIn because it was optimized. So you need to look at your LinkedIn, look to see if you've optimized it, look at where you're wanting to be, and look at how they have, worked on their LinkedIn profile, because your LinkedIn profile is essentially a mini CV to the world. So if you're still, I have some healthcare professionals, and I'll say it as a whole, I'm not necessarily thinking just pharmacists, because they're used to climbing the ladder in the NHS without really needing to have interviews or do their CV up much, and because the NHS usually has a very standard portal of applying, they don't really focus on their LinkedIn. So I'll look at someone's LinkedIn and it'll tell me they're an F1 doctor when actually they're a consultant. It means they haven't touched their LinkedIn for a long time, so I would always say that's a good place to start. Make sure your LinkedIn is optimized, and you've put down, you're wanting to sell yourself. So that's a good place to start, in terms of making sure when people look up your name, they see something that's up to date, because you're not giving out your CV, but that's your CV to the world. The next thing I would say is also agencies. I think that's really important, to make sure you're signed up to agencies. And that's literally looking on LinkedIn, seeing who is in the healthcare sciences, or the pharma industries, and then connecting, just adding them obviously. And I think I will caveat to add them when you are at the point of really being able to be hired. So pharmacy students, I wouldn't say that you should be adding recruiters or anything like that, but really where the jobs that you can see the applications are, on LinkedIn for jobs. There is also a gentleman that runs PharmaWeb. So he has a membership where he links to jobs. And there's also one called, oh, I forget the name. I could always send it later, but it's Pharma Web or something like that. I think it's something to do with pharma. There's another website that has all these jobs as well that you can connect to. So I think the main things I would always say is that you need to be with agencies, and the reason why I say about building your network is that there's, it's a bit like referrals. If somebody can vouch for you, you're going to trust that person more. So when you meet people who are in pharmacy and in pharma, and they can be like, oh yeah, I've worked with that person before, they're very good, or oh, I had a long chat with them, they've got this background, they've got this skill set, that goes a long way. So that's kind of why networking is important, because you just never know where your next job will come through. And also just even interacting with groups. I want to say, I've gone to events that have held by a group called Black Pharma, and they focus on increasing the percentage of Black people in pharma because we're underrepresented. So those kind of groups can also help, any sort of affiliation, that if you're in any minority group, you can join and sort of network that way as well. So I think there's lots of different avenues, but the importance of networking, it's not something we're used to, I will say, but it's something that I would advocate for.
Absolutely. And we've got a very specific question.
Okay.
I'm a pharmaceutical science student, just got my bachelor's.
Okay.
Can you explain which part of the industry can I find a job? So sort of what works? I know it's a very tough question when it's very specific, but maybe what could this individual consider? They've asked about how can I start, and I think you've already touched on that with this question.
I think so. When I work with healthcare professionals who are looking to leave their role, I kind of do like a deep dive into what do they like, because what I don't want is somebody to just jump into this job because they want to get out of another job, or jump into this because they've been told that's the best avenue. You need to look at what actually you like. So what I would say to the student is, what do you like of your pharmaceutical degree, if pharmaceutical science degree, what aspects interest you, and really do your research that will go complement your skill set, because there are a range of jobs when it comes to pharmaceutical sciences that you can go into. So I don't ever believe in giving a blanket, this is the best avenue for XYZ, because it also depends on your situation as well. So for example, because I had gotten to a point in my career where I was earning a certain amount, I knew that actually I didn't want to start at an entry level role within pharma. So for me, my best entry point was going to be med affairs, because I had the science background of being in oncology, being in clinical trials, so I could work effectively in medical affairs. Now, I'm not saying somebody who is just just qualified can't go into medical affairs, but there's going to be a difference in our knowledge, because I've had years of experience in oncology, and somebody who has just qualified may not have been exposed clinically or to a lot of therapy areas. So there's going to be a difference in that, and it doesn't matter, but there's just going to be a difference. So I always say, really, the best thing for an individual is to look at what their skills are, what they enjoy, what will complement them overall. So I don't think there's a blanket, oh, this is the role to go in, because it might be for that individual, but it might not be for the next individual. So I know it's not I always say to people, you can't get a one-word answer, and that's always been the case with pharmacy as a whole, I think.
So
Sorry, just ask a question, just slightly related, that I received in my private messages.
Okay.
Would you still recommend gaining the hospital experience that you did before transitioning into the industry?
Good question. I want to say personally, yes, but I know there's individuals who've gone in and they've thrived. So it's not a guarantee that you won't do well in the industry. But I also think it depends on where you're going into. Because I was going into medical affairs, I felt for me to be top of my game, really. I wanted my clinical knowledge to be strong, founded in hospital. But, say I've met an individual that's in regulatory affairs, they may not need to have that strong a knowledge in their And the thing is, I'm not saying if you're not in hospital, you don't have a good clinical foundation, because you've done your degree. You've done your degree, you do your pre-reg. There's a lot of training involved in that. So it's just that you don't have there is a lot of advantages of being in community, of being in hospital, and skills that it teaches you. But I don't think it's a necessity. I just think for me, it's what I wanted. And it's one of the reasons I chose to do a pre-reg that was solely in hospital. I'd been offered pre-regs that were mixed between industry and hospital, but I just felt actually my aim is to pass my pre-reg and I want to get my clinical knowledge. So I think it really is a personal decision and how comfortable you feel. But it's not a necessity. I do think those candidates who, this is probably, I'm going to probably put my own personal bias. I do think candidates who have had hospital and community experience are probably a more have a greater advantage, and that's purely because they've had that exposure.
We've got a few questions. It's quite funny for the way some of these are phrased. Where did you get your mentor from? Where do we find mentors?
No, to be honest, I was very lucky. Because he's my mentor, but he's also my uncle, so that helps. So I would pester him.
Yes.
So we grew up together. He has gone before me, so he knows. He's experienced lots of different things and knows. So that's a very good question, because it does require a lot of someone's time. But he had no choice. So I will shout him out, Paul Lulu, but yeah, he had no choice. So of my pestering and being able to, but I think, so for example, Black Pharma, they have a mentorship program. So that's always helpful. So if you can find groups that offer mentorship programs, I know that they offer, like, if you've been 5 years in pharma, you can be a mentor, and then you can join to find mentees can join to find mentors. So maybe just look. You just need to. There's going to be a lot of work on your part, and that's why I say you need to be strategic with your career. It's very easy in healthcare. I'm not just going to say pharmacy, in any healthcare profession where it's a vocation, to coast along, because we're needed. People are sick, so we're needed. So it's very easy to not be strategic in your career. With pharma, you do need that element of being strategic in your career. So if you're really serious about it and want to know more about it, look for where you can get mentors, look for bodies you can join, look for things that are offering that mentor. So that will require you just doing the work, basically. I know I didn't have to do that, but I'm certainly doing the work now in terms of networking and increasing those that I know in different areas and stuff. So
I mean, a shameless plug to add to that would be BiteLabs is, and I'll come
there's
to,
another one. Yes, exactly. Sorry.
I'll come to
Yes,
it later,
where
but
we are.
we do focus quite a lot on that mentorship and
Yeah,
networking side. But
yeah,
definitely, Black Pharma is an associations like that are
yeah.
incredible places to go to.
And I will say with BiteLabs, it really gives you from start to finish. I think when you're in pharmacy school, yes, you learn about industry, but depending on which university you go to, some touch on it lightly, some touch on it very little. It can vary. But with BiteLabs, it will take you from the start to the end, so that you know the whole process and know, actually, that area would interest me. No, that area would interest me. With drug development, will it be regulatory? Will it be compliance? There's so many roles, it's quite hard to capture it all. And even when I work in pharma, I meet pharmacists all the time who are like business head units or in governance or doing a vaccine program. They're all very different, and you just think, oh, how did you get into that? But they started it somewhere and their career went off in other avenues. So I think it's important. BiteLabs will give you a nice overview of everything, in one sort of format that you can learn from.
I think we'll take one more question in the interest of time.
Okay.
I want to take the last question because I think there's a lot of learning points from that. And that's, do you think a PhD is required or does it make it easier to get into pharma?
Good question. So I don't think it's a requirement, because I don't have one. So clearly it's not a requirement. I will say, the team I work with, very good team. You've got people who are PhD holders, and you've got people who are who've come from a clinical background, being medics or pharmacists, and we each bring value in different ways to the team. Um, you know, there's things that my PhD colleagues, they have no qualms doing literature research, literature reviews, or, looking at papers and, all the things that you needed to do when you were referencing for your dissertation. They have no qualms doing that. I don't really like that. I'm going to be honest, or that's maybe something they're more comfortable with as well, way more than I am. I don't even think my pharmacy degree had a module on stats. I think I only had stats exposure when I went to my master's in oncology. So there is value in a PhD, but a PhD is 4 years. If you're just doing it because you think it's going to get you along in your career, that's the wrong reason to do it. If there is a topic that is going to interest you for 4 years, yeah, go ahead, do it. Often though, when you're doing that topic for 4 years, and then you go into pharma, you're going to use aspects of it that you've learned, but you're not going to use that topic, especially if it's very niche. Like I mean, if you're working with fruit flies on something, fruit flies because it's some sort of looking at how they develop in some sort of way in response to antifungals, like you're probably not going to do that again unless so you need to think long and hard. I think I always say, what is the value of why you're doing that? I think 4 years is a long time and maybe I'm talking from a biased point of view, it's a long time to decide to do something that doesn't interest you. So I would say do a PhD if you want to do a PhD. I personally wouldn't do a PhD just because I think it will get me further in my career. I think there's other ways you can get further in your career. There's doctorates in pharmacy. We now have a doctorate in pharmacy now. Some universities are offering that. That would be, I think, a better avenue if you don't particularly have a strong passion for a particular topic as a PhD, or MBAs. There's so many other ways that you can learn and progress in your career. At the moment, I was doing an e-leader course, a leadership course in my company. I think that will add value to me, to my work ethic and being able to communicate with people and lead on projects. So I don't think I do think it helps, but I'm not of the school of thought that you have to have a PhD in order to excel in pharma.
Yeah. And I do agree with regards to sometimes people can be quite naive in their thought process prior to, not everyone, but some people can be quite naive in the thought process prior to applying for a PhD, where they think I might as well do it because it'll be great for my CV, and not thinking about everything that comes with that.
With it. Yeah. I have lots of friends who've done PhDs, and I've looked at them and I'm like, that's not for me. And like I say, it's different for everybody. But I'm just like, I don't think I could do. I don't know if I care enough about one topic to do it for 4 years. So
I completely appreciate that. We'll stop there with the questions in the interest of time. Tayo, thank you so much for just all the insights that you provided.
no
And
problem.
Hussein's going to give us some closing remarks from today's session.
No problem. I do want to say thank you for having me on, and thank you for the questions. If people have other questions, feel free to find me on LinkedIn, send me a question. I can't say I'll answer them straight away, but I will eventually answer them, is what I'll always say. But yeah, I hope it's all been helpful.
Just to add to that, if you want to message Tayo on LinkedIn, you now have to have a LinkedIn profile. So that's a good start. Someone's not got one.
Yes, indeed.
And I'll also add, there's a couple of questions that I received in the private chat, which we've not got around to answering.
Okay.
We'll share them with you, Tayo. And if we can, we'll try and get those answers back to you as well.
Okay, no
Right.
problem.
Well, thank you once again. Thank you, Yasser, for hosting it so wonderful.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's been good. I know I talk a lot, but it's there's a lot to talk through when it comes to pharma. So
No, it's incredible, and your knowledge and your experience is incredible, and definitely thank you so much for sharing, taking the time out to share it with us.
no problem.
The last sort of literally 5 minutes of your time, I'll take your guys, is just to kind of run you through what BiteLabs offers. I know we touched upon it really quickly during the conversation, but I don't know if you can see my screen now. You should be able to. Hopefully, you can. And I'll quickly go through some of these. I'll skip some of them, just the interest of time, I guess. But essentially what BiteLabs is a cross-functional training provider, talent finder, evidence generator, policy specialist, serving pharmaceutical, life sciences, and healthcare industry. We have over 20,000 people in our community, and that's across Bite Medicine, BiteLabs, Health Tech, and Bite Pharma. We are developed with a senior global faculty of 20 plus, actually it's more like 40 now actually, of advisors, people such as Tayo, who are very kind in their time and offering their help to us and advice to us in supporting our fellows the best way we can. And we're represented across over 17 countries. And that again is across BiteLabs, Bite Medicine, and Bite Pharma. So what do we do in our fellowship program? Essentially, it's a globally accredited level 7 diploma in global pharmaceutical and leaderships. Our main aim, I said this earlier, was to basically help you develop the skills, experience, and network you need to take your career into the pharmaceutical industry. Listening to Tayo earlier, a lot of what she said was around building that network, having those essential skills, initial skills, and showcasing that in your CV so that you are able to apply for those jobs going forward. And the way we do that is over our 8-week fellowship program. This is just a quick overview of it. But essentially we start with emotional intelligence and the change in mindset, a little bit what Tayo touched upon, but essentially the change in mindset that's required for you to go from your clinical environment, working as a pharmacist, into working in a corporate firm, towards leadership. You will have people working underneath you. Hopefully, at some point, you will become managers and leaders in the industry. And so we talk about that, inform you of that, what project management looks like, skills that you necessarily you have, you just don't know of. We highlight them to you, and then we move into the industry knowledge. And we touch upon all the key verticals within the pharmaceutical industry. So we go from biopharma, health tech and pharma, all the way to drug discovery, clinical trials, regulatory affairs, drug approval, patient safety, medical affairs, roles of medical affairs, right the way through to marketing, market access, and health economics. And all of these are delivered by industry leaders within that sector. So medical affairs is led by the country medical director for Moderna in the UK. We get for the omnichannel workshop that happens is done by Dr. Faiz Shivji, who is the global commercial director for immuno-oncology at AstraZeneca, for example. So people who have a lot of credibility in their fields are giving you knowledge from real life knowledge from what they have experienced over their working career. And all of that is underpinned with a group project that you work on as well. So depending on the fellowship type you take, we give you a group project or an individual project, which is assigned to you by industry leaders. So it might be our faculty, it might be our advisors, it might be pharma companies themselves. It's a project that you work on. And for you to work on that project, you're also assigned a mentor who you can reach out to for help with your project, but also your personal career development and insights on how you can build that up further. And on the final day, I'm going to go back a slide actually. So week 8 on the demo day, that's where you come together. The best presentations are then showcased in the industry, but we also invite a lot of the industry in. So we have global pharma leaders, people from life sciences, people from finance, law, all industries linked to the pharma and life sciences industry come together. We have a interesting panel discussion. So it will be on a topic that's going at the moment. So for example, our last workshop was around AI in medical affairs, and that was a panel discussion that we had, which had a lot of traction. We had CEOs for pharma companies attending, from governments, policymakers coming. So a really good opportunity for you to network amongst your peers and amongst the leaders in the industry, but also recruiters within the industry. We do focus on recruitment. Our KPI that we work towards is how many fellows we can place successfully into the industry or help them take that transition in their career. So across health tech and across pharma, we have quite a few success stories that we're working on. We've had and we're working on. It's something we're working on increasing constantly. Recent hires are in IQVIA, are in Bayer is the one that I just found about today in pharma company. So we're doing quite well in helping you develop that network and taking you forward into that next career step. So that's us. I think I did it under 4 minutes, so that should be okay, but I probably just rushed it. So if you have any questions, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn, on our website. There's a book a call feature, you can do that. I will also circulate an email. We get a discount code thanks to Yasser. If you guys use MicroPharm 10, you'll get 10% discount code for your next application. But I believe I can stop sharing the screen.
And just to add to that, so I'm hoping to be there for all the sessions for this cohort. So I'm very much as interested as anyone else in this call. So hopefully it will be great to see some faces there.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have Yasser join us.
That's good.
Amazing. I will stick around for a few minutes afterwards, just for any questions with regards to our fellowship program. But Tayo, thank you so much once again for your time, the insight.
No problem. Thank you all. And yeah, I hope it was all useful, and it's good to have this engagement and being able to talk about getting to pharma, because to be honest, it's my most asked question. So yeah.
Well, it's a pleasure to be able to facilitate it. And thank you, Yasser, for helping us organize and running this as well.
Thank you, Yasser.
Thank you. Thank you, Tayo.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.